Awesome. So we have Dr. Claire Johnson here. Thank you so much for being here and giving me your precious time. I know you have a busy schedule. So
My pleasure.
awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. Just with a brief introduction of yourself. So where are you from? Where did you go to school and what do you do now?
Sure. I'm originally from New York. My parents were born and raised in New York, but I was an army brat. So my dad, we traveled around. I lived in Germany, ended up growing up actually in the Midwest in Indianapolis, and graduated high school from there. Went to undergrad Loyola Chicago, but went back to medical school at Indiana University School of Medicine. And I practice clinically in obstetrics and gynecology. This has nothing to do with our drone discussion, but
Oh, that's
I
okay.
practice obstetrics and gynecology. And but I've always had a fascination for photography too. So in some of my travels, I had regular clinical work for many years just in Orlando, but then I started to do some international projects. And when I did those international projects in places like Chad, Central Africa, and Ghana, and Ethiopia, Saipan, which is U.S. in the Northern Marianas, I would do photography, and then I started to incorporate drone work. So in 2018, I obtained my FAA Part 107 license for drone work, which is applies to the U.S. of course, and
Gotcha.
not permission for every different country you fly in, but to do any commercial work in the U.S., you need your drone pilot license. So I applied for that, and it's really opened so many opportunities. So now instead of working clinically in medicine, I actually work in administration. So I'm mainly remote with that, but it gives me the liberty to travel. And then I can also do my drone projects too.
Gotcha.
And they started out initially in just photography, but it's really nice the impact that they've had now. So my last project was in Africatown near Mobile, Alabama, capturing images of where Clotilda, the final slave ship, arrived in that area, and just 2 years before slavery was abolished. And then um, my next drone project is in Nashville at Tennessee State. It's an agricultural project. So this is actually my first project that has nothing to do with photography, but it has to do with imagery through multispectral camera and assessing the health of an agricultural farm.
Got you. Well, that is
I
great.
also have I also have two adult children. I have a son who's a senior at University of Florida, majoring in political science, and I have a daughter who graduated from Oklahoma State. She was the in economics. She was a 2019 national champion in the 1500-meter race, and now she runs for Nike. She's a professional runner for Nike.
That is awesome.
Mhm.
Well, that was a lot, and
A lot.
unpack that after we finish the interview. But to start, I was also an army brat. My mom and dad were in the army, and I also grew up in Germany.
Right. Both. Okay.
Yeah,
Both your parents were in the army. And where were you? Where were they stationed?
they were stationed at Wiesbaden Army Airfield.
Wiesbaden. Yeah, I heard a lot about it. I was in Darmstadt and Kaiserslautern.
Okay, got you. K-Town. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So moving along, you already kind of answered my second question, but what did you like? Why did you choose to pursue drone work? You kind of already answered that. Why did
Well, I can tell you specifically. Like I said, I've loved photography for several years. I love natural, un what's the word? I'm trying to think. But I just love photography in its kind of natural state, not posed photography, just like candid photography. So I was actually watching a Netflix special, and it was all a series on photography. And there was a famous photographer, I can't remember his name, but he was using drone work in his photography. And I was just captivated, and just seeing the different angles and the interactions and that you can get. It's just very, very different. And so that was my initial draw. And then though, to be licensed, I was researching drone licensing, and it said at the time, this is in 2018, I think it was only about 4% of all drone pilots were women, period. And then the women of color, it was like a handful. It could have been 5 or 10, period, in the country. And so I love to represent, and I love a good challenge. So I was like, sign me up. And it was very different, very technical. I mean, I had come from a medical background, which can be challenging. This was just challenging in a very different way. Map reading, very new for me. All the different air zones. Really fascinating work. You know, a minuscule amount that the actual pilots have to go through, but great information to learn.
Well, it's still awesome that you get to learn that. I'm also a student pilot, so I'm also
Oh, so yes, so you know even more than I do.
oh no, no, no. I'm still getting there. I'm still getting there. So you definitely answered my next question in that statement. So we're on a roll. Hey, we're on a roll right now. So, well, I'll just go ahead and ask you again.
Sure.
What is the cost for training looking like? You know, timeline going from, you said you're a medical, you know, going from no time at all to a fully licensed drone pilot. What does that look like?
Um, well, I did a personal high speed of training. So I guess for my history of, I'll tell you how I did it and how I would recommend doing it.
Okay.
With my history of going through residency, going through medical school, having to absorb tons of information very quickly. Like when you go through a semester in college, you cover that same amount in 5, 6 weeks in medical school. So everything is very compact. I was used to that. In residency, I was used to that. Um, in residency, also, you have a board certification process. So I have to take exam after exam. And actually, it ends with oral board certification, which you don't have to do with the drone pilot. But so I did the fast track. I think I found out about drone licensing on a Monday. I ordered a course through Dart Drones on a Tuesday. Now, the great thing is, you mentioned YouTube. YouTube, you know, you were mentioning like, can I place this on YouTube? YouTube, of course, we know is phenomenal. I mean,
Oh,
I've changed headlights on my car with YouTube. You know, I've learned so much from YouTube. And YouTube has some great courses that are free, that are almost 2 hours, that cover probably enough to pass the exam without paying anything. It's wonderful. But I did pay, my course was about $300. I think the test itself was $300. And what I did, so the Dart drone course comes with lots and lots of practice tests. And I dove into it like I would in medical school. I kind of went through the course, probably a little too fast. I went through the course from Tuesday to Friday. On Friday, I started with practice tests, just like practice tests in medical school. I failed. I think I failed the first few tests, but that's okay. You know, the learning curve it's steep.
yeah.
And then you know, and then it's always a wake up call. Like, okay, I don't know this subject well, and I don't know that subject well. And then I just studied. By Saturday, I was passing all the tests. I took more on Sunday, Monday morning, and you have to make an appointment ahead of time at a testing center. Monday morning, I went in, and boom, I passed it. And I
Gotcha.
know a fair amount of people who didn't pass it the first time, the official exam. So it's really about, if you want to fail, fail at home, you know, fail the first few tests at home, really know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then go in there, you know, plus you save money because you never have to, not never, but until 3 years, you don't have to take it again, you know, so, but yeah, do lots of practice tests, realize what you don't know, and then go in and pass it. And yeah, it was great. So, and I had a friend, he is a premier now golf drone photographer. He's African American. I grew up with him. We just, you know each other through our photography now. And he is probably his name is Channing Benjamin. He's the #1 golf photographer in the US. And he had failed the test, and he doesn't hide this, but he had failed the test. But when I messaged him and told him I passed it, it was motivation for him to take it again. And he passed it, and he's had some incredible opportunities now with that.
Gotcha. I definitely understand that, you know, going through flight training. I luckily would utilize YouTube as well. And basically went through the same process of going and
Yeah,
doing.
right.
Got you. So moving, actually, let's stick on cost for a little bit. So when you passed your FAA test,
Mhm.
did you start off with one drone, or is there a drone that you recommend for beginners? And what
I
the costs look like, the cost range for?
do. And there are several options. So I recommend sticking with the DJI drones because the system, so DJI, they're like the number one manufacturer of drones and they range. I mean, they range from the Spark. I think the Smart Spark is the smallest. It's about 300, but you can get, there are people who are addicted to buying drones, right? So they fly it a little bit. They're like, oh, this is nice. And then they just want to sell it. So really for your first, now I did for my first drone, I did buy the Mavic Air and I think the Air was around 800. Um, but I would, looking back at it, I would look on the marketplace, Amazon, eBay, whatever, and I would look at refurbished ones because again, there are so many people. It's like iPhones, or any version of a new phone. They're so addicted to getting the next one that they're ready to put their last one on the market for like half the price. Even and it's a great product. It sometimes doesn't have the same warranty, but most of the time when you have a problem with a drone, it is operator dependent. It is because you're doing something wrong, you're not being cautious enough, you flew it too late at night, and now you can't find it in the air and it crashes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would recommend starting with like a Spark, something, something that's in your budget that you're not putting on a credit card and paying off, with a high interest rate over and over and over. And I'm saying that because I know kids like to you get your first drone or get your first credit card in college or something like that, and 25% interest rate. Like, no, don't go crazy. So I would recommend that. That was my first drone. It's a Mavic Air. Great 4K video, like very good. Next, I have the Mavic Pro 2, excellent drone. And then through a project with Tennessee State, I fly the Inspire 2, which is one of the Mac Daddy drones. Very expensive. And I attached for this next agricultural project, including with Dr. Archer, it's the MicaSense multispectral camera. I think that camera alone is 6,000 something. So but the nice thing is that, as you move along and you get projects, they pay for themselves. So, it can be an expense. If it's just a hobby, it can be very expensive. But if you, go down the road of getting projects and making sure it's paying for itself instead of just spending a bunch of money and not getting any return for it.
Understood. I completely get that. By any chance, have you met Dr. Clement?
No, I haven't.
Got you. Okay. So I think he also has a Mavic 2, and he was showing me around that because he also flies drones around campus. And I
Oh,
was like,
really?
that sounds really familiar. I'm still new to drones, and I'm still
Okay.
very new to it. So I'm
Yeah. I'd say the Mavic 2 is the biggest like crossover drone if you're somewhat using it recreationally, but you can also use it professionally. So people, and it's manageable. It's a small size. Yeah.
is it very since I'm kind of still trying to wrap my head around like the different sizes and I guess effectiveness of each drone, is it a big jump from a sort of a hobbyist drone to a professional drone? Like when you're going from, or no, is it just,
No, that's the nice thing. If you stick with, especially with the DJI company, besides the Spark, which is like I said, it's a little tiny drone. Besides that, once you get to the Mavic Air Pro and above, they're all like you can use in recreation. You can use them professionally. There are plenty of people using the Mavic Air and Pro for professional work.
so now I want to ask you the fun part, which is how is flying a drone? Because everybody wants to know how fun is it to fly?
Oh, they're fun. I mean, the perspective you get is completely different than you're used to. So just learning to launch it initially, and it's a little nerve wracking. It's like it's nothing compared to becoming a natural pilot. You're not in there. Worst case scenario, if it crashes, most likely, well, one, a lot of times they bounce back. You're most likely not going to hurt someone. Even FAA guidelines are, if it crashes into a person, you don't have to report it. It's only if they're injured that you have to report it. You're not supposed to be flying over people anyway, which is very different than, well, crowds of people, I should say. But it's fun. It is, just launching it and then seeing the perspective. You're looking in the screen, and it even, I started at my house, and it's like, oh wow, I've never seen this. And then I love photography, so the imagery that you get and finding the different angles, and it's like I feel like I'm up in the air and creating art, because I move it, and then certain parts, especially if I'm in a contrast. Let's say I'm on a beach, or a body of water. So you've got land and you've got water, and you start to move it around, and you see the contrast between the two of them. I love seeing the joy of other people watching it. When I was in Alabama this summer, late June, there is a retired, I think he's retired maybe, Joe Womack, and he is very passionate about the Africatown Project. And so he knows all the sites that are important along the way, but he had never seen everything through a drone. And we also had someone from the National Park Service too. So
Okay.
it's like, okay, we want this site done and we want this site, but when you lift it up and you show them this like beautiful, display of the site, it's a whole different thing. So I love the joy that you see from other people. And as exciting as it is to see Americans and the joy that they see from drones, I have flown it. I flew it in several areas where they'd never seen a drone before. So I was deep in Chad, and I flew it with the Fulani tribe. They're a nomadic tribe. Several tribes, but they're the nomadic tribe. And they speak many dialects, but they speak French, and I speak French, so I knew what they were saying. And I lifted it up, and they were like, "Avion, avion!" They're yelling plane, like bye, bye. And it was fascinating. And I have some really fun. They're on my Instagram, but I have some really fun photos of even lifting up the drone and then everyone surrounded and looking in the screen and just amazed, looking down, because, you know, even photography in general, there are areas of our world that you never get to see what you look like. There aren't mirrors, there aren't phones. So in general, you don't know what you look like. I mean, we don't, we have no concept that we see what we look like every day.
Yes, ma'am.
But they don't get to see what, the individuals they look like. And so you lift up the drone and everyone like is in awe looking at the screen and looking up. And so I have just loved the joy of that too.
I got you. That is amazing.
Mhm.
You just touched on this, and I'm going to ask you it again because I am following a little bit of a script. So, just to reiterate, what situations are drones best used for? You
I think, well, in general, drones are incredible at rescues and discovery. So, couple things. Rescues too in areas. Just imagine areas, and especially drones that you're using that are only they can fly very, very low, right? And the cost is only, quote unquote, only especially when a corporation is paying for it, an organization or a civil company is paying for it. But, to be able to get deep, like I live in Florida. So imagine if someone is lost out in the
know, definitely.
Everglades
Yeah.
or something like that, that it's able to get into areas where are not accessible well by humans. We have gators everywhere.
Yeah.
So they're not accessible very well for humans. So it's great for searches. I mean, on both sides of it, someone who needs to be rescued, someone who needs to be captured.
That's
Using drone,
true.
we have a big case right now, search for Brian Laundrie, but that too. Also, one of the best things I like, so there's a company called Zipline. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're based in California. But their projects are mainly in several countries in Africa. And what they do, and I've been on the other side of this, what they do is they use automated drone uh, deliveries of blood products. And in medicine, especially in obstetrics and gynecology, there's a lot of bleeding involved, and you're dealing with countries that have limited blood supply and access. Even if you can, so someone's bleeding out, and even if you have the blood products available, the roads are really, really tough. They're really difficult. Nothing is rapid. And the things that we take for granted, no one in a US hospital is going to bleed to death because blood products aren't available. It's a non-issue. It is not going to happen. Even if the hospital runs out, a blood bank nearby, another hospital nearby is going to get the blood and rapidly, right? We have good roads, we have great communication. But I, unfortunately, even personally, watched a patient in Chad bleed to death. She came from another hospital. She was postpartum. Unfortunately, sometimes there's complications with that. She was bleeding out, and we had to just watch her pass away because we didn't have blood products. So this company Zipline, they are working on automated blood deliveries, rapid blood deliveries in remote areas in several countries in Africa to get the products delivered in time and save so many lives. So I think I don't know if it gets better than that. Like, I think that's number one. They also have used them to deliver somebody's down a river, and they're just floating, something, we're hiking, whatever, they slip, they're floating down a river. They've used drones to deliver raft to them. It's just so this access of where we just can't get there fast enough. They can do that now.
Gotcha. That is amazing. I've never heard of Zipline before, but just being able to do
Yes, look it up. It's, yeah, incredible company.
that's really cool. What are your thoughts about Amazon, particularly thinking about delivering packages with drones?
It's interesting. Your city, do you have drone delivery in Nashville?
I'm not sure. I have to look into that.
Actually, last year I had an Uber driver of all things, and she told me that there was drone delivery. I don't know how prevalent it is. I think it's interesting. My worry is that there's too much air traffic. We don't want to get to a point where so when it's critical, when it's saving a life, capturing someone, lost, um, finding someone lost, delivering blood products, like those things are critical. But I know in my city and your city too, I think you have a fulfillment center. Like, I can get an Amazon product in a few hours, by vehicle. Like, I don't know how much, I don't want our airspace to be cluttered too much with drones, especially because pretty much, well, I think 100%, whatever is being delivered by Amazon is not emergent. You know what I mean? Like,
I got you.
if it were emergent, you'd be calling 911. You wouldn't be like
Definitely.
Amazon. So that does, concern me. And I'm sure they take those things into consideration, or FAA makes them take those things into consideration. But I'm like, it's a nice bonus, but I don't know. It's not anything critical to me.
I completely understand with the clogging of the airspace. There was a drone that almost hit one of the Blue Angels a few
Oh,
ago. It,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah. It's like,
completely get that.
right.
So here's a not so fun part, and I know I've had people ask me this about flight training and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I want to ask, what are some of the challenges of
Hmm.
becoming a drone pilot? Whether that be the actual, you can't launch it somewhere. What is the challenge that you face?
All those. I have had, so I've had two Mavic Air. So I started with one Mavic Air. Um, and she's floating in a lake in Ocala. There's a lot of trial and error. The fascinating thing with drone, there's statistics of drone crashing and all that, and it kind of makes sense. Men tend to, this is a psychological thing too, but men tend to be more renegade. So
Yeah,
men more crashes. It's kind of like young men and driving records.
yeah,
Like a little more. So women have far less crashes, but we tend to be a little more cautious, and maybe actually we should be more aggressive when we're flying the drones, but we're more. But So yeah, crashes. My I was doing well for a while, and then I was on a boat and I was trying to get some images as the boat was going around. We tried to launch it back to the boat, but didn't get the boat back to the correct site. And I reached out to grab the drone and it nicked my fingers and flopped into the,
Oh
because you can
no.
do drone landing in your hand, but it did not work out right. So that one ended up, fortunately, I was on a project, so they bought me another drone.
Hey.
My second drone has survived, and but she's crashed twice. And I've had some silly user error. So I was in Guatemala, and sometimes when you're in other countries, you don't have good cell reception because it's not relying on Wi-Fi. You have good cell you don't have it. You know, you can lose connection. So one, don't fly it too far, which FAA has rules for that anyway. But don't fly it too far. It has to be in your visual line of sight anyway. But I was flying a drone and kind of confused which direction it was going. I thought it was heading east when it was heading west, and got out of my sight. I went to land it, it hit a roof, but that survived. And then sometimes there are technical errors. I was actually in Indonesia. It, it, I don't know, some kind of malfunction. It immediately lifted up, flew backward, and hit a tree. But they're very resistant because that small drone, it lasted. I still have that drone.
Gotcha.
Um, it's always important to get permission, in other, well, in depending on the airspace, but also in the US, but also in other countries, you have to get permission. So you have to apply for permission. So um, I can tell you transparently that I haven't always applied for permission. I will in the future, but I haven't always applied for permission. And so I was in Indonesia and I went to launch the drone and it was sent down. So it was immediately, it had a warning on that. And yeah, it had a
Wow.
warning on it and it said your drone will land in 60 seconds, and they sent it right down.
Wow.
And it just depends on the area, because I was in an area called Labuan Bajo. That's where they sent it down. I was in Bali. They just let it fly. Just depends on the area. And I was probably unfortunately too close to an airport or some kind of military zone that I didn't know about. And I was going to say one other thing that I have dealt with. Oh, and then there are a lot of some areas where you like get excited about flying the drone, and then there's a fence. So, like even at our beaches, even if you're 5 miles away from an airport, there are places that the beaches near me that you can't launch it. So you're excited, you're going to do a project, and then it's like, nope, not going to launch. But even some of the basic stuff, I've had a battery that just died. It did for no reason. It just died. They do have a little bit of a mind on their own, but they have definitely come pretty far.
Got you. How much is maintenance, if you lose a battery or if you,
Oh,
yeah.
the batteries range about $50 a piece, and you always want to have several anyway because none of the drone batteries last long. So they're only about a 30-minute time frame. So if you're doing a long project, you have to land, change batteries, have a battery charger. But yeah, it's about that. And I've never actually done any maintenance on mine. They've flown just fine. Haven't had any big warning signs except for the one battery that didn't function.
Got you.
But DJI has a great program about sending it in, evaluating it. Even I had a crash. Once I sent it in, they evaluated it for me, and well, they said it was user error, but but they will evaluate things for you.
Got you. So, just to give you a little bit of a scope of my project, I'm comparing manned and unmanned. I think I already said that. I might have already said that. But it seems like with unmanned technology, with drone, we're going to exclude satellites because I'm not really able to, get a hold of somebody with a satellite. But
Mhm.
with drones, you're able to be very flexible with where you can launch and what you can do versus, for an aerial photographer in the manned arena where you have to launch from a runway and then you have to coordinate and, it's very limited. So that seems like something that's also really cool. And I just want to say, lastly, is there anything that I missed? Is there something that you would like to shout out or say or that anybody should know about drones, or anyone who wants to get into being a drone pilot? Is there anything that I did not ask?
I think that, well, especially with your project with manned versus unmanned, I think that anyone who has an interest in drones, it is, I think it's important to learn how to fly them and all that. But I think in the future, it's definitely going to go far more unmanned. Like it's just going to be, everything's going to be mapped and controlled remotely, and humans won't be needed, well, actually out in the field as much, so I think that's going to go away. But I think it's a great time to get in it. There's so many opportunities, and it goes from from a hobby to a profession, and it's nice, in I'm in a lot of fire communities, of the financial independence, retire early communities, and they ask it a lot about side jobs. What's a good side job? What's a good side job? And the nice thing is like drone work. It never has to be it can be, it can be a whole profession, but it's such a nice side job. It's a nice second profession of whatever, your number one plan is, because it's just needed so much in so many different areas. So I think it's a great time to get in there. Oh, and if you do get in, Facebook, I know Facebook isn't as popular with young folks, but Facebook has some great groups. And the number one is, I think it's called DJI. Let me look it up just to get the official name of it.
Oh,
Um,
that's sweet.
but they have multiple groups of people that will help you night and day. And I say night and day because they're from all over the world. But yeah, this one is called Official DJI Owners Group. And this one has 145,000 people in the group, and they're all over the world. So getting into drones, and you get inspiration there. You see what other like opportunities there are, and if you have any questions, or at any time, then you can find someone to answer that. And then there are subset groups. There's a DJI Spark group. There's a DJI Mavic Air group. There's a Pro group. There's an Inspire 2 group. So they can answer specific things related to your specific drone.
Got you. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time of your day to do this interview with me. It means a lot. Is there any sort of way we can follow you? Instagram, Facebook?
Yes, I am on Instagram. It's everything and anything. No, it's mainly I travel. It's traveled extensively to all 7 continents, 100 countries, and every modern world wonder. So I put a lot. My next trip is to Turkey and Egypt. So yes, so my Instagram is Daisy Among Roses. So it's DAISYAMONGROSES. So Daisy Among Roses. And my name is up there, Claire Johnson.
Awesome. Sweet. Again, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm so grateful to be here, to be able to have done this.
My pleasure. And good luck with your pilot's license and your future career. Very exciting.
I'm very inspired to be a drone pilot now. I might just have to stop training altogether and just make the switch over to drone license.
And I have someone, hold on one sec. I know you can link this all together. There's someone I want you, then you probably, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but
I'm not yet.
yes, not yet, but oh, Ernest Huffman, hit ERNESTHUFFMAN, and he's in Texas, and he has a lot. He's highly involved in drone work. Actually, I just see a post of him. No, before you fly your drone, but highly involved. So he's a great connection too. Just out in the African American man, like out in the world of drones, and very, very proactive in the field.
Got you. Well, it was a pleasure doing this interview with you. Thank you so much. I really can't be thankful enough. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Thanks for contacting me. Yeah, I really wish you the best. Contact me anytime if you have any other questions.
Will do. Thank you again.
Take care.
Take care. I